Good afternoon and welcome to our session, which I hope will be a very nice continuation from the previous discussion that Christina led. So this session will be focusing more on the practical side, how actually companies can take all these activities that they're already doing, which we heard about, and then take it into their overall corporate decisions, corporate strategies, and disclosures. But first, let me welcome our distinguished panel of experts who will join me today for this discussion. Please, welcome to the floor. Thank you very much. Please. Well, maybe just to begin with, until recently, nature has mostly been considered as a resource. But these days, we see a big change in the mindset, and today nature is more being considered as an asset that can have impact on the businesses, either as a risk or as an opportunity. And next week, we will celebrate the official release of the framework from the Taskforce on Nature-Related Financial Disclosures, or TNFD, which will help, hopefully, businesses going forward in understanding how to assess, manage and disclose nature-related impacts, dependencies, risks, and opportunities. And today we have a very distinguished panel of experts who will tell their stories already, how they start embracing TNFD as a framework. Some of our experts have been even behind the development of the TNFD framework. And I hope their stories will be inspiring for you also to start looking into TNFD as the new framework for your nature-related activities, assessment and integration in your overall strategies. All right, let me start first with introducing Andrew Mitchel, who is one of the leading nature specialists around the world, and he is actually behind the TNFD development. Today he is joining us online from the United Kingdom. And in fact, Andrew has been instrumental in not just developing the TNFD, but also other frameworks such as CDP Forest, for example. Andrew, can you hear us well? Good morning, I guess.
Yes, hello, good morning. Good morning from England. I'm in a small island called Jersey, just to the south of the United Kingdom, so I'm sorry I can't come and join you in Hong Kong.
Thank you very much, Andrew, for joining us. Well, first question to you. As you have been really instrumental in developing these international frameworks, such as TNFD, which we're all looking forward to, tell us, please, a little bit how companies can actually use TNFD as an approach in assessing nature-related risks, dependencies, and impacts. And what's most importantly, and comments and questions that we receive from many companies in different sectors, how to quantify these dependencies, risks, and impacts.
Yes, well, thank you very much. I enjoyed listening to the previous session where people were struggling with what can we actually do. There's a sort of sense that after climate, nature is next, but it looks like it's more complicated. We don't have a target like 1.5 degrees. We don't have a currency like a ton of CO2 for nature. It looks complicated, and yet everybody feels that we must do something. We see the degradation of nature going on all over the world, and I've been working at the front line of conservation for nearly 50 years through my research group in Oxford called Global Canopy. And I thought, you know, where is the greatest collective blindness on this issue? And I felt it was in the financial sector. There are lots of NGOs who understand this. The Hong Kong government understands it. You've banned ivory. You know, you're aware of ban the trade in ivory. So, you know, there are lots of things where governments are aware. But what I found the biggest area of blindness was in big pools of capital, like pension funds. And when we try to save nature, we spend about 150 billion a year doing that from governments. But the value of subsidies that are harming nature is 5 or 7 times bigger than that. So even if we doubled all the money going in from governments, we wouldn't come close to beating the subsidies that are harming nature. And then if you add to that the nature negative money coming from the private sector, it runs into trillions of dollars. And I look out for the State of Finance for Nature report coming out from the United Nations Environment Programme in a couple of months, where we quantify for the first time the scale of nature negative money coming from the private sector. So if we want to win this, we need to turn that around. And that is why I thought that we should set up the Taskforce for nature-related financial disclosure, because the TCFD has been quite effective at getting people to work on climate, coupled with the agreement on climate in Paris. With nature, we now have a similar agreement at Kunming in COP15, and we have the TNFD launching next week. The value of the TNFD is that it's going to help all businesses and finance as well to see a way through the maze to understand how we can actually grapple with nature-related risk. So it's not only a risk management framework, but it's also a reporting and disclosure framework. And it allows businesses to sort of understand a new language, the language of nature, as opposed to the language of climate. So we have created that language in the TNFD framework. We've also created metrics and data, and which will help with target setting. All of this will come out next week, and I know many people are saying, well, what are the metrics that we can use, and how can we set targets? Well, you'll have to wait till next week, and it'll all be there. We'll be releasing metrics and targets for 10 sectors, which are most closely linked to the degradation of nature. As a start, more will come later. So how does it work? Well, if you're already using the TCFD to deal with climate risk, you will find the TNFD very similar. We also have an approach which is around physical risk, which are things like, hurricanes and storm damage, those sorts of things in climate, physical risk like that, transition risk, which might be the costs of moving to a new state, such as legal costs and regulatory costs, and then systemic risks, which are things that come out of left field that you don't expect that change the whole system. COVID-19 is a very good example of a nature-related systemic risk, which has changed the whole world. These things are big, by the way. Don't think it's smaller than climate. Nature risk covers loads of sectors, not just agriculture. It's very important to understand that. And on our panel, we've got representatives from Towngas, we've got Swires, we've got insurance, so it's across a lot of interesting sectors. We look forward to hearing what they've got to say. So very briefly, there's a thing called LEAP, which we have created, L-E-A-P. That means location, evaluate, assess, and prepare. Those are the 4 steps that TNFD takes you through. And the most important and different one from the TCFD is the first one, which is locate. Nature risk is very location specific. If you, for instance, are a mining company, whether your mine is in a delta or a desert gives it a very different nature risk profile. So you have to start knowing where your assets are located. And that isn't often the case. If you're a bank lending to, say, a big gold mining company worldwide, it might have 50 locations around the world. You don't always know where that loan is actually hitting the ground. So we're going to have to start collecting data on location. And that's the starting point for a lot of this. And the E, the evaluate, well, how big is my risk? What is it? Is it a big risk or is it a small risk? And then assess it. Well, okay, is that a problem or not a problem for us? Either from a regulatory perspective or a public relations perspective, or in terms of our supply of goods that we need to run our business. And then finally, what am I going to tell the world about this? I may want to keep some of the information internally for our own use, but some of it I want to disclose. And guess what? We were talking in the last panel about, should this become mandatory? Well, I suspect it probably will eventually become mandatory, because that's what happened with TCFD. Most countries, it's still voluntary, but more and more are making it mandatory. I suspect the same thing will happen with TNFD. It'll start out voluntary. We're already seeing many companies, over 250 odd of our respondents in our corporate network said, we're ready to do this by 2024 or 25. It's fascinating to see how quickly this is being picked up. So that's very gratifying for me, and I think I'll stop there because to let others have a word. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Andrew. I fully agree with you in terms of the specifics of the TNFD as compared to TCFD in terms of the location. And let us maybe take it from there. And I would like to ask you also a follow-up question about the target setting. Because of such a diversity of ecosystems, biomes, how can we actually define and set targets that could be comparable across different geographies?
Well, you're right, it's difficult with targets because we don't have the framework like we do for climate on targets, but we do have 30 by 30. In other words, let's protect 30% of the world by 2030. That's not very far away, by the way, but that's what the Kunming Agreement said. So maybe we can start with that. Let's look at our portfolios or our supply chains. How about we say that 30% of that should do no harm to nature by 2030? Well, do we even know whether they're causing harm or not? If you're a pension fund, you probably don't. But there are tools out there that can help you do that. So I think we've got the beginnings of a framework. We also need a better dashboard to be able to read out and know what's good and what's bad, what's nature positive. We need a definition of what nature positive is, and we need an aligned pathway like the SBTI, which is the Sustainable for Climate. We need one of those for nature so that we can all see what track we're on. That will come later. And once we put those things in place, we'll be on track to hit the 30 by 30 target and do better than that after that.
Well, thank you very much, Andrew. Please don't go too far, and encouragement for everyone in the audience to start coming up with your questions since we have such interesting experts today on the panel. Thank you, Andrew. And I will switch to the panelists who are present here in the room today. And we have actually very interesting cases from very different sectors today, companies who are already embracing TNFD, and actually based on our experience, because we as a consulting firm work with different companies around the world. In fact, food, beverage, agribusiness, finance, real estate, and oil and gas and power are among the early starters in terms of nature integration into business strategies and disclosures. All right, let me first introduce to you Derek Wu, lead consultant at AXA Climate. And I would really like to hear Derek's perspective from the financial sector, because I know that you're already working with some big corporates, other financial institutions in terms of climate and now nature risks assessments. Please tell us a little bit more about what you're doing, and more specifically, any specific approaches from TNFD framework that you're already integrating in doing business with other clients of yours.
Yeah, thanks Yulia for the introduction. So a very quick word about AXA Climate. So I'm the lead consultant in AXA Climate. So AXA, I think everyone knows about us being an insurer. But what we're trying to do is really to leverage our data and also risk expertise, and also fuse it with the climatologists that we have in-house to really provide services when it comes to on the topic of climate, but now also more and more so on the topic of nature. So in a nutshell, like we work with like financial institutions or corporates to really understand how the whole nature movement is going to evolve, and what are some of the practical steps when it comes to nature risk assessment that they can actually launch. And I think like what Andrew, you mentioned about how the whole TNFD background, I think you make a very like solid case when it comes to why now, and also why or like do companies and institutions need to focus on TNFD and also the nature risk. So maybe I can shed a little bit light on when it comes to more specifically on the practical stuff on how do like us or trying to help or assist different companies to launch a biodiversity risk assessment. And that actually echoes very well to what Andrew mentioned about the whole TNFD lead process. So Andrew really like very concisely mentioned about the LEAP, the locate, evaluate, assess, and also prepare stage. So I'm trying not to like bore everyone with a whole long list of like frameworks and stuff, but I think essentially how biodiversity risk assessment or assessment works is first looking into when it comes to nature risk, it's really about geospatial analysis, right? So what Andrew mentioned about the locate is really crucial in the sense that we really need to understand where your assets or where your operations are located in. And I guess for a lot of companies here right now in Hong Kong, in such an urbanized area, not only will direct operations be one of the areas areas that people are looking into, but at the same time, supply chains-wise or any value chain-wise, I think that will also be another areas that when it comes to biodiversity risk, that will be a very critical part. And understanding those data and getting those geospatial information, I think that will be one of the very foundation and crucial part when it comes to biodiversity assessment. And then moving on, I think another crucial concept when it comes to biodiversity risk is also the understanding of like how biodiversity risk works in a dual materiality way. So when Andrew mentioned about the evaluate step, meaning how do I assess my impact towards nature, but at the same time, how do I understand my dependencies of nature to my business as well? So I think the evaluate stage is really to understand how these two materiality works and how these like two perspective works when it comes to your own operations and your business as well. And finally, I think for assess and also for prepare, is really to translate what the locations that we have, the impact and dependencies that we identify, and finally, how does it translate into my business risk and opportunities, right? Because at the end of the day, not only is it important for us to understand what is happening on the ground, what are some of the interactions and interfaces do I have with nature, but at the same time, how do I translate it into business case in terms of like risk and opportunities as well. So I think that is also another quite crucial part that we are trying to help and facilitate our clients to understand, how does the whole TNFD framework work and how can I guide them step by step when it comes to the whole LEAP framework. Yeah. And maybe afterwards I can touch a little bit more on the challenges, but I'll hand it back to you. And,
thank you very much, Derek. I was going to ask you, because a very common comment that we keep on receiving from our clients as well is, we've just got familiar with TCFD and climate risk assessment, now nature. And it's really overwhelming for many companies. Any recommendations from your side, how companies can actually take some of the approaches from the climate risk assessment and use them for the benefit of nature risks assessment and going forward, impacts and dependencies?
Yeah, no, that's a really great question. I think like Isaac and Patrick will be able to share more because they are actually working within their organization about that. But I think just a quick few points that I can think of. I think the first thing is I also recognize that the wordings that we're using in this panel might be a little bit hard to digest for a lot of people. So I think the first really big challenge will be understanding the terminologies and also the words and the phrases that we use and describe nature as a risk. So I think that is actually the biggest part that I think for any organizations when they're trying to on board on the whole nature journey, I think it's really important for them to understand the terminologies from TNFD or from any assessment frameworks. At the same time, really understand it and interpret it in a way that is relevant to their business, right? So I think that's a really crucial part. And just one last point when it comes to a challenge is more about the whole data availability, but also not only availability, but also the interpretation. So I don't want to share a lot on the data part because a lot of data sets have been developing, and then I think there's still not a very complete, holistic approach when it comes to which data sets to choose. But I think one key point I just would like highlight on is also on the interpretation side. So one thing that is a big mistake that I try to avoid when it comes to working with clients is turning the whole TNFD into like a data crunching exercise, right? Because there's one thing of having the data, but at the same time, it's interpreting the data is also the more important part. So if there's a critical habitus around your business, so what does it really mean? Like if you identify threatened species around your business and supply chain, what are some of the risks and opportunities that you can capture as well? So it's really down to having the data and also having the right interpretation. I think that is also a big challenge that I can see a lot of businesses trying to get better on. Yeah.
All right, thank you very much, Derek. We'll definitely get back to the data point. I think it's a common challenge for many companies, and Andrew, that question may go to you later. Be prepared. Let me first introduce you our next distinguished panelist, Isaac Yeung, who is head of corporate and head of corporate ESG and corporate affairs at Towngas. And Towngas has been quite well known for having conducted quite a lot of biodiversity studies already and embracing TNFD framework in your overall ESG journey. So because you have to do this biodiversity study across 100 locations, if I'm not mistaken, I would like to ask you a similar question that I asked to Andrew. How do you deal with the fact that there are so many location-specific aspects to it? How do you bring conformity to the results as well? And how do you compare the results that you get?
Okay, thank you. Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen, and good morning, Andrew. I'm not as confident as that ASA. I don't know you know Towngas or not, but Towngas been in Hong Kong for more than 160 years. Have been in the mainland China for more than 20 years. And before I answer the question raised by Yulia, and I would like to speak a little more. We don't have a very sophisticated jargon, but one term I always like to use, that is the clear waters and green mountains are as good as mountains of gold and silver. This is quoted by the Chinese mainland presidency. That means that we are always coexistence with the nature. Okay, so if I said we have been in Hong Kong for more than 1.5 centuries, but we entered in the Chinese market for not more than 3 decades. And every year they have this code that they have their plan to have a very good place for the people there. So we have more than 60 projects, 600 projects in the Chinese mainland, all over the 28 provincial areas out of the 31 provincial areas. So even though it is not a law or a legal requirement, but if the government has the vision to provide better living to the people, then we have to follow. And when you see the 14th five-year planning, there are 3 chapters on the nature side. In fact, as many of you already know that China is the first National Ecology Day on the 15th of August this year. And I would like to quote something on the 14th five-year plan. For the 3 chapters, they have the main theme to promoting green development and harmonious coexistence between man and nature. And also for the 5-year plan, they have 20 KPIs. Okay, for the 20 KPIs, they have to achieve during the 2021 and 2025. But out of the 20 KPIs, only 3 is regarding to the GDP growth, etc. 5 of them are related to the nature. I would like to spare 1 more minute. One of them is the unit consumption of energy per GDP. Another one is unit decrease of the carbon dioxide per GDP, and also the forest coverage rate and the air and the water, etc. They have very hard KPI for them. So why I quote this? Because we are operating in the Chinese mainland, and also one of the speaker from the Sino said we have to comply with the expectations from our investor. So because of this, we have to to look into the TCFD very closely and look into the TNFD very close. So for the 100 sites we identified under the TCFD by the consultant using some terminology, some methodology, and we also identified 17 more locations. That is, we have studied the 117 sites using the methodology like the protected areas and the key biodiversity areas, and also the number of count of threatened species, and we identified out of the 117 sites we located in the Chinese mainland in Hong Kong, we identified 11 very high biodiversity risk locations. One of them is in Hong Kong. In Hong Kong, we produce manufactured gas in Tai Po Industrial Park, but this Tai Po Industrial Park is within 10 kilometers of the key biodiversity areas and also protected areas. But we don't know yet by then, because the industrial park is the first industrial park by the Hong Kong government back in 1976, and our plant was built in 1986. So this is the risk. Oh, we have our plant there, so what should we do? We don't have to demolish the plant, right? So we have to think how to better to tackle this issue. And when we process, we have when we process the Towngas, we have some steam okay, coming up, and then we spare it to the atmosphere. But after we studied this last year, in November last year, we did the study on TNFD, and we found this is the high risk thing. So we think, can we reduce the emission of the steam to the atmosphere, etc.? So now recently we have successfully to make use of this wasted steam, and then we make some process and we lay some pipeline, send this steam to the neighborhood. There is a food factory also in the Taiwan industrial plant, and they make use of this kind of steam to be a dehumidifier. At the end of the day, we are win-win. They win, we win, and also the environment win because of these measures. They use less electricity and less Towngas, and there will be more than 35,000 trees per year can be, the carbon emission equivalent of this project.
Yeah, that's an excellent example how actually climate and nature topics can be connected as well. And maybe as a follow-up, because I understand in your study you dealt a lot with the operational risks and impacts and upstream related risks and impacts. But have you considered also downstream implications from the nature related topic, including, for example, your customers?
Thank you. Yes, in fact, you may already know that for our production plant in Hong Kong, in the Taiwan plant, in Taiwan Estate, where during our manufacturing of the gas, we just contribute only 1% of the whole Hong Kong GHG, and including the scope fee, when the customer switch on their hot plate, the total emission is only accounted to 4% of the whole Hong Kong GHG emission. But we still think of how to decrease their emission of the carbon dioxide or the GHG, because the climate change and also the biodiversity is interrelated. Okay, so we have some ways. Number one, we have to increase the efficiency of our appliance sell to the customer. So they, for example, previously they have to say boil 2 minutes or 10 minutes for hot water, and because of increase of the efficiency, it may be reduced to 8 minutes. That is one thing we can do. Another one is that we have some kind of innovation, like for the water heater, and we have invented some kind of the battery that we can use the water for within the water heater to have some electricity generated, and then we store it as a battery, just like you drive your car. Okay, so the customer need not to replace every 2 years or 3 years for the battery for immersion of the water heater. So these are all some of the examples that we are helping our customers to reduce their carbon footprint.
Thank you very much, Isaac. And actually a very good point. When we talk about nature, we shouldn't forget it's not just about biodiversity, it's also about water, by the way. Yeah, so we always need to remember about this bigger picture. Thank you. We'll get back to you later. But last but not the least, let me please introduce to you Patrick Hu, who is the Swire Properties Limited Deputy Head of Sustainable Development and actually Taskforce member of TNFD. And actually before this panel, Patrick also told me that he's going to the official ceremony of the TNFD launch in New York, where would be very looking forward to hear from you about this as well. But maybe before then, since Patrick, you have been involved in TNFD as one of the 40 members. And Swire Properties is also, we know, one of the pioneers in adopting TNFD as the framework. Could you please share with us why did you decide to get engaged in TNFD and pilot it within your organization?
Thank you, Yulia, for having me today, and very nice to see a lot of old friends and connections and a lot of interest in biodiversity, nature, and TNFD in particular. The previous panel was also spot on, a lot of demand from the market that there should be a framework to actually help business to understand the issue. A lot of jargons, right? And a lot of what is the exposure of business to the resultant risks and opportunities. But that needs to be done in a scientific way. And so today I'm going to share a little bit from both as a Swire Properties, and a real estate and construction sector player, the perspective of why, and also as a TNFD member, what TNFD offers to the market. So I think your question, goes back to why we do it. I guess Swire Properties, has been, investing a lot on sustainable development our strategy requires us to develop every development. It should be a sustainable place. And biodiversity, as of course, is the important part of that whole formula. And we have been doing a lot of things like taking concrete steps to ensure we have positive impact to the natural environment, from nature inclusive design to some nature-based solutions, and promoting circularity in a building construction operation phase. We all prioritize sustainability. This not only help us to, as John said, understand, manage risk, but also giving us some competitive edge in properties that we rent to tenants and buildings we sell to customers. Because public really try to starting to appreciate the power of nature. And also from the investment side, ESG performance are increasingly scrutinized by investors and also by our commercial tenants. And of course, the pandemic over the past years also highlighted the importance of well-being and demand for green space, fresh air. And our tenants recognize the importance of biodiversity, and features like we have a lot in our portfolio, like green roofs, urban farms, and green walls, for example. These are all really visible and also desirable by many of them. And this will potentially build property value over time, which we hopefully will see in the future. So I'm myself also very honored to be one of the 40 TNFD Taskforce members and participate also together with World Business Council for Sustainable Development, WBCSD, to conducting a pilot. And with this privilege, we have been able to become an early adopter, actively testing and piloting the TNFD framework. This allows us to provide direct feedback to a TNFD, make sure it's practical, implementable, and also contribute learnings insights to help the framework evolve. So from a real estate developer perspective, we pilot TNFD based on three main drives. Firstly, it provides a systematic and scientific approach to understand our risk exposure to nature and biodiversity risks, and it offers valuable insights into business opportunities, guiding us towards making investment towards the nature positive side. And for real estate industry, we are seeing the emergence of related regulatory risk, actually, multiple jurisdictions around the world, not in Hong Kong yet, but have passed new policies that incorporate biodiversity into the planning process. For example, in 2023, United Kingdom biodiversity net gain regulation actually requires a 10% net gain in biodiversity as a condition of planning permission for all new developments across England and Wales. And secondly, it also clear many investors are already asking more questions related to nature and biodiversity for organizations to which they provide capital. For example, the Norges Bank Investment Management is the biggest sovereign wealth fund in the world, and BlackRock, Aviva have specifically called out TNFD, encouraging companies to start disclosing information against the draft framework. And regular investor call that we're receiving quite many questions now from investors asking how my company actually work to contribute to nature positive outcome. So the TNFD disclosure actually helped that to improve our visibility and transparency in nature-related risk management and corporate governance. And this enhances stakeholder confidence in our work and reinforces our commitment to sustainable development. And lastly and thirdly, as we strive for net zero emissions by 2050, as a group, we recognize the importance of climate-based solutions in fighting climate change. The latest IPCC report highlights the nature-based solutions actually contribute up to 34% of the total GHG emissions. So as business navigate pathway, towards net zero GHG emissions and adaptive impact of climate change, it is also important to recognize that biodiversity in nature, must be the integral components of both the plan and the solution. So climate and biodiversity are two, complementary sides, of that same earthly coin. Yeah.
Excellent point, Patrick. And actually, I would like to highlight that real estate is an interesting sector where nature can bring positive benefits and positive impacts and opportunities to the business, right? Because you can also, through nature solutions, address climate issues, improve on the climate resilience, and many other aspects that you can tackle in one go. If you don't mind, could you please share any lessons learned from your TNFD pilot? And because I'm sure we have quite a lot of real estate companies here in the room, given Hong Kong as a market. Anything that you could share with the audience based on your experience?
Pleasure, sure. So same as Towngas example, we have been implementing LEAP assessment approach recommended by TNFD to evaluate our dependencies and impact on nature. And currently, we are conducting a portfolio screening in a global portfolio, Hong Kong, China, USA, to identify priority locations that may have higher dependencies or impact to nature, where we can make tangible improvement to biodiversity. Our experience in reporting against TCFD over the past few years, 5 years, has prepared us, I think, pretty well for that governance structure. And for managing climate-related issues also can be easily adapted to nature-related concerns. So furthermore, through our ongoing reporting, sustainability reporting, we have been collecting a lot of important core data metrics. If you read the draft disclosure, for example, water usage, waste generation, biodiversity data, consumption volume of some high-impact nature commodities and greenhouse gas. So these are more readily available data. By utilizing this data, we have improved our understanding about connections to nature, as well as identifying material dependencies and impact. So additionally, we're working with Derek, and we have leveraged some proprietary global data sets, actually help us to collate and analyze spatial and scientific data to understand nature interface per site, each of the sites, with types of data, for example, critical habitats, protected areas, water stress, threatened species, species diversity and richness, and also the intactness of the biodiversity. So it has to go pretty in-depth. And the process has facilitated to have a completely new understanding, of all our sites that we manage with the interface with the nature. So the TNFD pilot has provided us with very valuable insights so far, particularly regarding the importance of gathering nature-related data and translating into practical and actionable insight. For example, when we initiate our flagship portfolio, Taikoo Place in Quarry Bay, the redevelopment project there, we conduct a very comprehensive urban biodiversity study in collaboration with Dr. Billy Howe of Hong Kong U. The study helped us to establish a very scientific baseline for biodiversity in the Quarry Bay area, and proposed measures to achieve biodiversity net gain over time. And the study's findings informed our investment in blue-green infrastructure, resulting in a landscape design that incorporates large-size feng shui woodland species that are native to Hong Kong, first of all, and the size is equivalent to around 70 square feet of additional urban greenery. So to achieve a healthy and resilient urban forest, we also made reference to principles like 10, 20, 30 basic rule of plant diversity as a start. That means no more than 10% of any one species, 20% of one genus, and 30% of one family of the plant species to ensure the biodiversity of the landscape plan. So what we plan to achieve here in Taikoo Place is to achieve approximately 35% of whole Taikoo Place will be covered by greenery space, featuring a continuous tall tree canopy that actually acts as our green corridor, facilitating the movement of bird species and insect like butterflies between, if you come to Quarry Bay Park, it's just a 5 minutes walk, you will be already in a Quarry Bay Country Park. That's just across the road. So, and also there is a big, trees, woodland also in the Quarry Bay Park. So what we try to create here in Taikoo Place is sort of a concept of green corridor. We connect the species between the country park and the public parks of the government within a business district of Taikoo Place. So the investment in green space will also, of course, raise our climate adaptation ability. So at the green space, of course, help us to absorb rainwater. Like last week, we have no flooding in Quarry Bay in our area, and also, that's also helped by a lot of greenery space that actually help us to slow and store water during these intense spring effect, and also help us improve the microclimate by reducing the heat island effect, and also the district level air quality will also be improved. That's benefiting the health and well-being of the local community. So this exemplifies how important it is that nature-positive buildings can create value for business, people, and planet. And lastly, to conclude, another illustration of a commitment to nature-based solutions come from our USA, Miami portfolio, where we focus a lot on climate adaptation. So back in 2021, actually the government, the United States Army Corps of Engineers proposed a plan to mitigate flooding is to build a very tall seawall near the waterfront, a massive flood wall. And of course, you pose a risk also, to the waterfront views and functionality of that area. So to address this, Swire Properties' US colleagues actually collaborate with engineering firm to propose an alternative solution that only protect that area, but also enhance Miami's urban coastline. And that plan actually includes a series of natural barriers, for example, submerged oyster reef, mangroves, and planters, to dissipate wave energy. And this nature-based solution, while meeting all the engineering criteria of flood mitigation, it actually provides a viable alternative with a much more accessible and desirable waterfront environment for the public to enjoy. So the socio-economic value you can see, and that plan actually got actually stirred up the whole discussion with the government, and as a result of that, public-private collaboration and discussions. The U.S. Army actually agreed in 2022 to reevaluate the initial flood wall proposal. They now allocate additional budget and time for the public and the private companies to come together to envisage a better future plan that would balance a lot of things, right, while preserving, protecting the environment in a more equitable manner, and also taking care of the nature-based solutions. So this is another example that I want to share. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Patrick. A lot of inspirational stories for all those who are present here in the room. Maybe just for the sake of time, one last quick round of questions for each of our panelists. And Andrew, I cannot but go back to you, because quite a few times we have mentioned data issues already when we talk about nature risks, dependencies, and impact assessment, especially if we talk about data related to our supply chains. It's really a common challenge. And would there be any further guidance in TNFD in relation to that, or any common metrics that companies could use?
Well, you're right that data is a big challenge. There is a lot of data out there available, and as some of the panelists have already said, a lot of tools as well. The problem is that the data is not generally in the right state for it to be decision grade for business, and certainly not for finance. So one of the things we've been thinking of at TNFD is creating a global public data facility which can scoop together this nature data and translate it into stuff which is useful for pension funds, investors, or banks. That's work ongoing. But I think when it comes to supply chains, and this is really important for Hong Kong because so many goods come into Hong Kong from all over the world. So a lot of the time in China is doing an amazing job of dealing with what's going on inside its borders and improving and restoring nature. But often the big impacts are happening outside the borders. So soya, for example, coming from Brazil, which might be linked to deforestation in the Amazon, that feeds chickens and pigs and so on in China. So the traceability of these commodities is now much better understood. One, I would urge those who are interested in this to go look at Trace Finance, that's T-R-A-S-E Finance, which is a tool available through Global Canopy in Oxford. And this traces the movement of commodities like soy, palm oil, beef, paper and pulp. We're getting much more data on that. You can see exactly where these are produced and where they're consumed in a global sense. So it's very possible you can just click on China and see where all these commodities come from in the world instantly. You can click on financial institutions and see who's financing the distribution of these commodities and who is trading them and so on. So all this is much more transparent now. This helps governments, which are looking at trying to control the importation of commodities that have a risk of exposure to biodiversity loss. For instance, in the European Union, there are new laws coming in which will make it illegal to import products into the European Union that are linked to deforestation. The same thing is happening in the UK. And it's not enough just to say, oh, it's okay because we do whatever's legal in that country, which is often the position that China takes, for instance, which is a very reasonable position. The problem is that a lot of deforestation is legal, but is poorly controlled. So, and a huge amount is illegal, of course. And knowing the difference, what's legal and what's illegal, is really difficult. So just going on a legality framework doesn't actually stop the destruction. That's the point. So there is a lot of data. We need to translate it better. And I would just make one final point, and that is that we've heard a lot of talk about trees and butterflies and bees. We need to think of nature as infrastructure that's keeping the earth safe. This is big stuff. Oceans that are sucking carbon out of the atmosphere. Trees that keep the land surface cool and provide rain for crops. We're not just talking about little bees and pollinators. This is big stuff. And we need to get data on that sort of big infrastructure stuff. So just to make that point, and I think as you heard already, Swire is collecting a lot of interesting data, fascinating to hear what Towngas is doing as well. You know, the linear infrastructure, creating corridors, all of that kind of thing, and AXA from an insurance perspective as well. Really interesting to see how we can all work together on this.
Thank you very much, Andrew. My next question I would like to direct to Isaac, because we've heard already a lot of different initiatives that companies are already doing in relation to TNFD, preparing themselves for disclosures, but obviously it cannot happen without an internal change, because nature topic needs to be integrated into the overall ESG governance. Any insights from your company, how Towngas, for example, is already integrating nature, or any recommendations for other companies in this room?
Okay, thank you, Yulia. In fact, I would like to look into this, not just nature, but also the climate change from a more macro perspective. Because the first time, initially people may think that you have to put a lot of resources to tackle about or to fulfill the requirement by the legislation or to fulfill the expectations of the investors. But there are risks and also there are opportunities. For example, if you do not doing good on climate change or on the nature, then your investor, potential investor, will have, they will not buy your stocks, okay? But there will be opportunities. I just like to quote one more thing, because nowadays we are looking into the usage of the hydrogen in Hong Kong, right? Also in China and all over the world. But because our manufactured gas, we have 49% of the composition is hydrogen already, and we all know that for the transportation of hydrogen is expensive and quite dangerous. But in Hong Kong, we have more than 370 kilometers of our pipelines all over in Hong Kong. So whenever if you like to use hydrogen, then we can have a facility at your place to extract this hydrogen for use. Okay, it is not green hydrogen, but it is still better than other fossil fuel. So this is another business for our company. So I would like to say is that we have to embrace with all those requirements from the nature, from the climate change, but don't be afraid. I think opportunities and risks are the twins.
Thank you very much, Isaac. My last question for Derek would be about capacity building, because we definitely cannot do nature without building internal capacities within the organization. What's your experience in that?
Yeah, so maybe 2 quick points. I know time is running up. I saw a sign. So I think the first thing is really touch on by the panelists is how TNFD is, the design of TNFD is really to build on top from the TCFD, right? So I think one of the capacity building is really to don't overcomplicate things. I think what people or companies have been doing on TCFD side can definitely be leveraged and be expanded on the total TNFD topic. I think that's the first point. I think one final point before I pass to Patrick is that I think it's also from what I hear from different companies and businesses is that they are slightly afraid to start another topic while they're talking about climate change. I think I would like to kind of challenge that thought in a way that I think focusing on biodiversity in nature is less about starting a new topic, but instead challenging us to think more systemically. Because when it comes to what Andrew mentioned about systemic risk, right? Nature and biodiversity, part of it is really talking about the whole system. So I think it's really also having thought internally in your business, how not only are we tackling climate change, but how does climate change relate to other businesses and relate to other Earth system as well. So I think that is also one thought, one kind of paradigm shift that I think will be very helpful whenever companies are starting it.
Thank you very much. And Isaac, last comment from you. What to prepare for companies who are not yet familiar with TNFD? What's next for them?
Yeah, for sure. After Monday, it's not the end, right? After the launch, it's more important for TNFD to shift the focus. After framework's done, it's very important to do the capacity building bit, and also Andrew talked about the public data repository. I think every one of us, in Hong Kong, can also contribute to that data provision and data sharing. I think that was going to come into play. And of course, working with many organizations, I guess the capacity building bit is also important after we have the framework come. So I guess there's one more thing that I think can invite every one of you to do and attend is the public, the seminar, the launch ceremony. Actually, the TNFD Global Launch webinar next Tuesday at 7 p.m. at Hong Kong time. They will actually cover the finalized disclosure recommendations, and there will be a lot of mentioning about the additional guidance. Because when we get down to the nitty-gritty, you need to go down to very sector-specific stuff. So I'm involved in that real estate and construction sector guidance, and there are many other sectors. From your industry, you will probably get a lot more insights into how to apply that overview of TNFD into your sector-specific guidance. So you will get the metrics support as well, and so that's the overall direction of where TNFD will go. I'm sure that in Hong Kong, we will need to work harder to catch up and also get prepared for that. I think but that's for a very good reason. I think nature is what all businesses rely on. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Please join me in a round of applause to our guest speakers today, Andrew, Derek, Isaac, and Patrick. Thank you for sharing your stories with us.